Hello, I am the Movie Maestro. Welcome to yet another of my film reviews. While the film noir genre is continually explored in what I'm making these reviews for, there's a certain time period that seemed to be a very big moment for this genre. Film noir films used to be B-pictures for a long time alongside science fiction and horror movies, but towards the end of the 60s and into the 70s they became much more prevalent and got much more of a reputation as great works of cinema. And that brings us to this particular film from 1974 from one of the greatest directors of all time, Roman Polanski, and probably one of the biggest downers of a film that I have ever seen, even regarding the time period, having seen several films of similar style from that time. And that movie is, of course, Chinatown, starring Jack Nicholson, Faye Dunaway, and John Huston. Jack Nicholson plays Jake Gittes, a reputation-obsessed private investigator who's called upon to help matrimonially involving a man named Mulray, the president of the Los Angeles Power and Water Company, who is openly opposed against the construction of a new dam. So, Jake agrees to go into the investigation, tails Mulray, and manages to put him in papers. However, he is confronted by a woman who claims to be the real spouse of Mulray, and upon realizing that he has been tricked, well, he goes on a very long trek to try and figure out what is going on in the situation. And over the course of the story, gradually becomes more and more obsessed as the criminal activity piles up further and further along, particularly regarding the wife's father, played by John Huston. Jake discovers Mulray's body drowned and filled with salt water, and that further along fuels his urge to try and get behind the whole situation, believing he can do something for the greater good and to protect his own personal reputation for his own greedy means. Though at one point it does lead to him getting a serious wound from a man with a knife, oddly enough, played by the film's director Roman Polanski, which leads to the iconic image of the nose bandage, which is one of the popular images with this film. The rest of the film drives along, further going deeper into the mystery, but ultimately leading to one of the most downbeat conclusions that has ever been put to film, within the early neo-noir genre at least. Much like The Third Man, this film works just based on its very wonderfully made atmosphere. From a cinematography standpoint of the time, it is unbelievable how some of the techniques are utilized. And even also carrying from The Third Man, there's the fact that the femme fatale is not what you'd call the femme fatale per se, as much as she just has a very pained backstory and a horrible weight on her shoulders that never quite leaves, particularly towards her ultimate fate. And Faye Dunaway plays this character wonderfully. In addition to the well-thought-out cinematography, the atmosphere is also well established by the music, one of the first of the many fantastic musical scores written by one of my personal favorite film composers, the late great Jerry Goldsmith. And it adds so much to the experience, being very wistful and very dark, but as things progress becomes more dissonant and more wild as the situation and the crime gradually becomes more dense and more complicating within the eyes of Jake Gittes. And, in my opinion, is one of the best scores I've heard within the genre of film noir. There's a great deal of symbolism in this film as well. The fact that John Huston's character constantly refers to Jake Gittes' character as Mr. Gitz, or even the fact that the situation regarding the crime has a connection to the Watergate crisis, which took place at around pretty much the same time. And it ultimately adds to the fact that this movie was probably made at the perfect time to be released. If it wasn't, it probably wouldn't have gained the enormous reputation that it has, but boy does it pay off. I think it's safe to say that this is one of the most fascinating films that I have personally experienced in the neo-noir genre. Not that the film is 100% without flaw, however, but much like with Rear Window, I think they're just really tiny nitpicks. For one, Jack Nicholson's kind of hard not to think of as someone for ironic comedy, and there are a couple unintentionally silly moments with him, but he does a surprisingly good job with how dramatic his character is in the story arc and everything. Also, the pacing isn't quite perfect, in spite of how well plot and atmosphere driven it is. But with that said, they aren't too big of a deal. But probably the ultimate disclaimer is that for anyone interested in this genre, watch with caution. This is absolutely not an upper. I mean, film noirs usually have a downbeat ending, but this one is one that really takes the cake. With that said, I can't call them flaws that damage the experience of watching this movie, so I can definitely give them a pass. Overall, I think it's safe to say that Chinatown is another one of my all-time favorite films. Even those not particularly interested in the neo-noir genre should probably give this a watch. You might be surprised. However, view with discretion, because this has one of the most bitter conclusions you will ever see in a film. With that said, it's a remarkable film in almost every regard. Jack Nicholson's great, Faye Dunaway's great, John Huston's great, Johnny Alonso's cinematography's great, Jerry Goldsmith's musical score is great, Robert Towne's writing is excellent, Roman Polanski's direction is excellent. It's overall an excellent film. On the worth meter, I think this gets a solid worth owning from me. And as for my rating out of 5, this gets a 5. Thank you for your time.